Well, hey, folks, beautiful afternoon here in Michigan. I tell you what, when you're listening to this, this is a little bit in the past, maybe a couple weeks here, but winter came all in one weekend. It decided to dump. I think we're sitting at 14 inches of snow in total, and we probably have a couple coming tonight. Temperatures have dipped super low, and it's one of those things like everybody's hunkering in. Everybody's either knows somebody or trying to find somebody with a snowplow, and yeah, we're just digging out and enjoying inside because nobody really wants to be outside as of right now. A big coyote tournament got canceled here in Michigan because of the snow and blow that was going to be happening. So that was, yeah, it's pretty relevant this time. But anyway, I don't know what cold is, so I'm talking with Jeff Benda. Jeff is a author. He is a wild game chef, and he is currently in the Dakotas. I forgot if is it the North Dakota, South Dakota where you're at, Jeff? You were just
Oh no,
telling me temps. Where are you
it's
at?
the real Dakota. It's North Dakota. Yeah.
North
No, I'm right
Dakota.
here. I'm right here in Fargo.
Gotcha. Fargo, the right where the movie was made. What are your temps looking at right now? You were just telling me -5 as a real temp, correct?
Well, it's mid-afternoon, so it's the high is -5, and that's the real temperature. And then we have the wind chills, which are in the -30s. So yeah, somebody actually just posted on Instagram that we were 130-degree difference between here and Florida, and that's just 130-degree difference. I
In the
and you have
same
to understand
country.
that. Yeah, I used to live on an island off the coast of Florida, and I came back here, and I I'm still very confused about that decision in my life, but yeah, yeah,
Oh my goodness.
yeah.
Living
So
yeah,
it's
living in
cold. Yeah, it's
paradise
cold.
but yet coming back to North Dakota. There must be something that
Yeah.
drew you back. I think it was it the hunting.
Hunting.
Yeah, I was going
No,
to say
yeah,
is that
it
what
was
brought you back?
hunting. Yeah, I was gonna go back to Florida, permanently, and then somebody took me duck hunting, and a week later pheasant hunting, 2 weeks later deer hunting, and I've been here ever since. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, hey, as we get started into our conversation, well, how was your 2023? What were your big game and your small game seasons like of the past? I know we're looking forward to the future, and I don't know. For me, I've everything's kind of on pause until till temps come up a little bit. But how was your this past year for you?
Going all the way back to the spring, I was super excited to do spring goose. I had multiple hunts set up, whether it was Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota. They all got canceled. I mean, it was just a mess of a spring, and so I still have yet to do a snow goose hunt. So I was really down on that, but then for the first time, we have paddlefish snagging out in the western part of the state, like way out, like right on the Montana border, like Williston, and it starts May 1st. And I said, I'm going to do it this year. And so I packed up the tent, went out there and camped, and I touched base on Facebook with a couple guys who were going to show me the ropes. And I got my first paddlefish, and it was absolutely a phenomenal experience. You're right on the confluence. We're right where Lewis and Clark camped, right? You're literally staring at the spot where Sitting Bull surrendered. I mean, it's just like this magical historical place, and you're snagging paddlefish, and it's a pretty cool time. So I had a great kickoff in May, a good start with the summer. Early goose, we are able to hunt Canada geese starting August 15th here. So you're out there scouting wheat stubble fields, and that was a really good time. I mean, we got a lot of Canada geese around here in the eastern part of North Dakota. So got a lot of geese. We're filling up the freezer. Shot a lot of ducks. we were eating them fast. So, and and then went out to the Badlands and got my first deer with a bow. So that was pretty exciting. I had never shot anything with my bow before, and then it was rifle season, and went out to Montana, and that was kind of a crazy situation because every time I plan to go to Montana for a meat hunt, it's mule deer does. And I'm always super excited, and I've always got a couple tags, and every time I go, it doesn't matter when I plan the trip. The biggest first snowstorm of the year across the upper Midwest is gonna hit that day. And so I told my wife, I'm like, this is when I had it scheduled, and I said, well, I've got 2 deer tags. I said, but I literally have 24 hours. I'll only have 24 hours out there, like in north central Montana. And she's like, I don't care. She's like, you talk about this all year. She's like, you can shoot 2 deer in a day. I'm like, oh, I mean, sure. Okay. So I literally left. I drove 11 hours out there from Fargo and got out there and slept in a rest area. Got up the next morning, and by 10:15, I had 2 deer down.
Oh my
and
goodness.
and packed up and was back on the road that afternoon because the snowstorm was starting at 5 p.m. Like, it was crazy. Like, then I drove back to North Dakota with 2 deer because my wife told me I had to do that.
I
And I
love
always
her
listen to my wife.
confidence in
So,
you. That was
right?
a scene out of shoot. That's like a scene out of 300 where she's like, "You will
Oh,
come
yeah.
back with deer, or you won't come back at all. Like, come back
Yeah.
with a full freezer or a full cooler, or you be in the cooler. One or the other."
Yeah. It was crazy. Like, I saw one doe out there. She was like 200 yards away, all by herself. I shot. She dropped. I looked through the scope again, and there was 2 deer standing there. And I'm like, did I miss? Wait, no, there was more. They were down in the grass, and they stood up. So I literally got my other one 10 seconds after the first, filled my 2 tags on some block management out there in Montana, and I was done. Went out there, did some filming, took some photos, and I was back on the road, quartered them up and was back on the road. So pretty crazy. I would have loved to have some more time out there. It's beautiful country. So,
Absolutely. But hey,
yeah.
you had to get something done. You had to get 2 does back in under
That's
24
right.
hours.
Yeah.
You know
And
what?
lack of sleep, but yeah.
Yeah. You know what? People talk about being like big buck hunters are like hardcore. Jeff, you just took meat hunting to the next level. Like, listen, fellas. No. I have a ticking time clock. I have less than a full day to do this, and we'll
Yeah.
get it done by 10:30. First deer down. The next one, 10 seconds after that. And then, yeah, you quartered them up, shipped out of there, and
Yeah.
your freezer's half full at that point. That is
Yeah. It was pretty
hardcore.
nice. Yeah. It was pretty nice. So, yep. So between that and I was able to get, I made a couple trips to Texas. That's been a pretty great new experience for me this last year. The She Hunts Skills Camp, run by Brittany Boddington. So she takes ladies out on a ranch in Texas. It's a 20,000 acre ranch, and they're able to. Some are huge avid hunters. I mean, some have done safari like out in Africa, and some have never picked up a gun before or a bow, and so they're learning to shoot bow. They're learning to shoot shotguns, rifles, and then they're able to do a hunt. They can kind of choose one of the exotics that are down there, and they have some crazy options that are down on this huge ranch. But so I was invited to go down there and do a butchering class and a cooking class, and I did 4 of them in 2023. And the last 2, one in October and one in December, they threw in a deer hunt. So the one in October, I was able to shoot a white-tailed doe, and then this last one in December, they let me shoot a management buck. And I haven't shot a white-tailed buck in years, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. So, yeah, so five. I think I got 5 deer this year.
Well, look at you.
So yeah,
Freezer's full, a
so
whole bunch of ducks, whole
yeah,
bunch of geese. It's been
yeah,
a plentiful harvest for you, Jeff.
yeah,
I'm happy for you. That's awesome.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Quick question: as I was getting ready for this podcast, my wife was starting dinner. This was her night. She happened to be up in there, so she was starting uh, chili. We're doing just venison chili, whitetail. I made a whole bunch of burger a couple nights ago. We had a big grind night. Buddy came over, and so I did 50 pounds. He did, I think, 30 pounds. So it was like 80 pounds through the grind that night. We had a great time doing it. Kicked back a few beers, but she was she was searing off the meat in a pan next to where she's going to be having them in the Dutch oven. She's building the flavors as we're going along, but she crowded the plate or the crowded the pan. She put 2 pounds in there, and it was real balled up. And I couldn't help myself. I grabbed the spatula and I began to work on it and spread it around and try to thin this out. Like we want to brown it, we don't want to steam it. But as I did it, she turned and stood and just stared at me, and I realized like I'm in the zone. Like I am in someone's realm right now. And luckily I've learned to like when I get that look, I just dropped the spatula, I just backed up and I got out of the kitchen at that point and let her do the thing. Um but it was one of those like moments where and we've discussed this I guess with my wife, like she cooks different than I do.
Yeah.
And there's an order that I follow that she finds it just doesn't make sense. But at the same time, when I watch her do things, I'm like, this, you're missing the point on this area here. You're steaming the meat, you're not browning it. But at that point, she's in the mix of it. I got to get out of there. How do you, as a professional chef or a cook that travels around and shows people how to butcher animals and writes recipes, when you're alongside of another cook, whether it is a relative like your wife or cousin or whatever, or if it's someone who's also culinary trained, how do you find that meeting ground? How do you cook together with someone who may not follow your same philosophy?
When I'm in the kitchen cooking, my wife generally is not.
She just vacates.
So, right. I remember when I went to. I think that just helps after 14 plus years of marriage, she's basically stopped cooking. She's the baker. Like I can't get Toll House chocolate chip cookies right, but she's magic when it comes to that. So we don't have that same situation in our house. And it's funny because like I remember when I was out in Montana and I with a client, and I was people will hire me as their camp cook and their photographer and then their butcher if they get something. And I was out there, and I was on my way back, and I called and talked. My daughter got on the phone, and she's 8, and I said, "Hey, what'd you guys have for supper?" And she goes, "Dad, it was so bad." And my wife I'm on speakerphone, and she goes, and my wife was so mad at her because she spit it out back in the bowl. She made some soup, and I was like, it couldn't have been that bad. And my wife was like, it was not that bad. And Lucia, our daughter, she goes, Dad, it was bad. And so I got home, and my wife had saved some of it for me. I got back really late that night, and the next morning, I was like, okay, well, she's like, well, let's just have the leftover soup for lunch. So she comes home. By the time she got home for lunch to have lunch with me, she's like, "Where's the soup?" And I was like, "Oh, it's gone." She's like, "You ate it?" I go, "No, I tried it. It's in the garbage."
It's gone. That's it. End of
Now,
story.
it's not always that bad because when I was in Texas, when I called home, and my daughter was so proud of her mom. And I was like, "Hey, what'd you guys have for supper tonight?" She goes, "Dad, she made soup again. And this time, it was actually pretty good." So, yeah. my wife lets me do all the cooking. And but Minnesota farm girl, I think she just she can cook. It's just sometimes sometimes it just doesn't go that well, right? Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah. Now,
Best
yeah,
laid plans.
right. So it's pretty easy for me, as especially as a dad of a daughter who loves to be in the kitchen with me. I have learned being in professional kitchens. You just learn to work, side by side with people, and sometimes that goes well, sometimes that doesn't, and it depends on if you're the boss or if you're not, right? When I had a catering business, and I would always tell, usually it was young people, kids that were working for me, and I would always say, I'm never going to yell at you, and if it sounds like I'm yelling at you, I'm not. I'm just I'm 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 just maybe speaking to you in a tone so that I feel like you understand me, right? But you know, I am not going to say I like things a certain way, and I'm probably that's why I do what I do. I got out of the restaurant business, and now I'm a home cook, right? I develop recipes at home for whether it's for different companies who want to use the recipes on their websites or different magazines, things like that. And I think that just fits me a little bit better. Although cooking with an 8-year-old who's been cooking with me since she was a toddler, you learn patience, and I appreciate that we're in a home setting, a home cooking setting, because I got all the time in the world. When she's at home, that's why I love that I do this full time. When I'm doing a recipe, if I'm developing a recipe for a client, I'm doing it during the day, and I shut down work when it's 5 o'clock, and my wife is home and my daughter's home. Dad's not taking pictures. Dad's not doing stuff like that. So if she wants to chop something with a knife, if she wants to stir something, whatever like that, I just that hasn't always been the case, and I had to learn that. So Nick, it's not I'm not saying that took years, because when I was doing this part time, they ate a lot of cold food while Dad was trying to take pictures, to try to send off to a magazine because it was supper time and food's getting cold because I'm trying to take shots from different angles, you know, and that's just not the case anymore. So, I am not going to give you marriage advice on how to cook with your wife because my wife, if she ever listens to this, she's going to say, I had no place in doing that. But I think, you, especially in situations like when we were at the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Rendezvous, we're all there's a bunch of cooks in the kitchen and we're all cooking. You just kind of fall into, everybody was helping everybody. It really is. You just you get in those situations. Like Hank Shaw was there. He's doing his thing. And I'm not stepping in to tell Hank Shaw how to make soup, right? I'm not doing that.
Right.
But, Hank, what can I do for you? And, I might help plating or something like that. Or one of the other chefs, when he was grilling bison steaks, and I'm sitting there slicing, I'm asking him, it's his dish. I'm just there to help. And so I'm asking him exactly how thin do you want it? How do you want it plated and things like that. So I think you just I've learned after this many years, if I'm in the role of taking charge, take charge and make sure you let everybody know exactly how you want it. That way the client, the customer, whoever it is happy. But I'm a very laid back cook when I'm in a family setting. And people it's weird because people invite me over for dinner and they're like, I'm so sorry this is only burgers, right? I'm like, what? I love burgers. Like, this does not have to be fancy. I don't want to cook fancy all the time. I don't need to be the cook all the time. And so, when I get invited over to somebody's house or a family function, I love just sitting back and letting other people cook. So yeah, and
Excellent.
I that's taken some time to
Yeah.
learn that. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Well, good. Good. I'm glad. Yeah. I'll stick with my realm too. If there's a zone that I find myself in where I start to grab things when I didn't ask permission, or I'm like
Right.
getting in and starting to mess with something that again I didn't ask what was going to be happening on. Maybe that was my problem. I didn't ask any questions. I didn't ask to help. I just came in and started fiddling with things, and
Right.
yeah, I got
I
the
think that's just the automatic husband thing that we try to fix everything.
absolutely. I just
Yeah.
wanted to spread it out a little bit, but
Yep.
oh man, the glare that I tell you,
Yeah.
that glare will get me to back up right now, and that has taken time. That has taken time for me to learn that you're going to get bit if you keep doing what you're doing. So I at
Right.
least knew enough to step back. Well, hey, kind of going off a different tangent now. You had a chance. You were talk. We were talking, trying to set up a time to get on here, and you got hired up to butcher two elk that buddies of your had or friends of yours they had or clients to butcher out some elk. And as I was kind of probing through this, you're cutting meat for somebody.
Yeah.
They have a cut list. They have something that they're working that they expect, whether it's they want it all into steaks or ground, or they wanted roast and whole cuts. As as you're going through that process, as you're going through a cut list, I mean, mainly if they've put that together for you, it's pretty easy. You just follow that. But as you're now breaking stuff down at the table, breaking stuff at the block, there's a translation that has to happen now to the table. There's a methodology to get from this whole haunch or this whole top round to now I want to serve a roast at the table, or even I want to do steaks, maybe half of that top round. When you're putting stuff into the freezer, be it for a client, be it for yourself, what are you thinking as far as, or what's your process going from the block to the freezer, hoping to help yourself out at the table? This is that gray area that I was thinking about as far as I'm trying to turn this animal into meals, and I wanted to
Yeah.
step into meal planning. How do I do that with a whole animal laying in front of me?
Yeah. These two actually. So, husband and wife, they went down to New Mexico and they shot a spike and a cow. They brought it back. They're from out like Watford City, North Dakota, out in western North Dakota. And they get these two elk back and they take it over to the butcher. They call them up and they're like, "Yeah, we won't take that because they're so full with deer and they're just batching all of that together." They're like, "We are taking no elk and no moose for 3 months."
Holy smokes!
So now they're frantic. They're like, "What do we do?" So they literally have to. We meet like in Jamestown, North Dakota. They call me up and they're like, "Could you do it?" And so I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to." So I met him and I literally get these two coolers full of boneless meat, and a little bit difficult to identify some of it. So I really had to take my time and do that. But so I got it back. But I anytime I deal with a client, in that situation that you're talking about, like how am I going to cut it up? It all depends on really like how big is their family. So like, like for me, when I'm cutting up meat, I'm packaging it up for a dinner. There's only three of us. And so when I'm packaging things, I'm like, okay, how much are we going to eat for dinner? And then how much am I going to pack for my wife Melissa for lunch the next day? Right? And so am I getting like 4 servings out of that? Because now I'm just moving on to the next thing and the next meal. And so I'm looking at 4 servings. So for this gal who I met, her and her husband, I said, they wanted stuff for like a steak or a package of steak or a roast that's going to feed a family of 6, or even 8 people. Now that's a big,
I would say
that,
that's like a whole, whole
yeah,
top round at that point, a whole big
yeah,
roast.
yeah. So I mean, like, am I doing, am I doing a pound? Like, I'm not just going to put it in, especially when packaging. Am I just going to vacuum seal like one steak, like a 6-ounce steak or an 8-ounce steak? Normally people like we're not usually doing that, and so she wanted, like, I was able to put like 2 or 3 steaks or 4 steaks in one vacuum seal bag, right? And they're okay with that
Yeah.
because that's what they're going to eat, and she only has to take out one package, and so some of it is smaller, but some I'm able to do that, and same with roasts. You know, how many people do you plan to serve? And so generally I'll do like maybe some smaller roasts, maybe some bigger roasts. I always, when I'm labeling and dating it, I have exactly how many pounds it is, how many ounces it is, and so they know, how many is this really going to feed. They can kind of get an idea of that. So, it's the same thing in my freezer. I do the same thing. So I might have smaller roasts or smaller packages of steak that's just going to be for the girls and I. But then I'll do bigger ones. That way I can, when I go to the farm and I know I'm going to feed 12 people, with the meat that I'm going to have, then I can package it as such, and then I can do that. So I think a lot of people just do, like, when you go to a butcher, you're just going to get that same thing. But I think, like, if you're, Nick, if you're like me, then you're doing your own stuff, or maybe even just some of it, and so you can, you, you know, you, I do that just because I save on freezer bags, the vacuum
There
seal
you go.
bags,
Yeah.
you know. So it just makes a life a little bit easier. But I'm always, and any time I do it, it's aged, and the silver skin, like, there is no trimming. I'm also tenderizing those cuts with the Jacquard meat tenderizer, every steak, and so, and that is literally ready to hit the pan. Like, when it thaws out, it's ready for the pan, or it's ready for the grill. Right when it comes out, there's no need to trim any silver skin or anything else like that off. So,
Gotcha. That's your
yeah.
mentality is when you pull that package out for steak or for chuck or for chunks or whatever you're going to go with it, you have it. It's thawed. It's ready to go. It's as
Yeah,
far as
because
you
I don't
put
know. Yeah,
salt,
am I going to
pepper,
gift it?
whatever you need on it. Bam,
Yeah.
it's bam.
Well, because I didn't do that in the beginning, and then I would gift it to somebody, and then they don't know to take the silver skin off. And if that's going to be their first experience with a venison steak, so I have it all ready to go. So I don't know if that, whatever meat that I pull out of my freezer, that steak, I want it to be, like, ready to go, whether it's for me or for my wife. If I'm gone and she's gonna use it, or if it's a friend or a family member, it's just ready to go, and that's just how I package. Yeah,
Nice. I've gotten
yeah,
into the habit of, and it kind of shortcuts me at the beginning when I'm at the block. I'm just taking seam it out, and I'll put the whole muscle group, say it be a top round. I will then just label that top round, that individual uh, uh, piece of muscle. Like that,
yeah,
that's what I cut out. I vacuum seal that, label it as top round, and it goes into the freezer. Um, where I haven't taken that extra forethought, like you have gone through cutting those individual steaks, is maybe I'll want to do some top round steaks, or I'll want to make some jerky. Well, the jerky, I would make the whole thing, and it'd be easy to work with that. But I might cut off, a number of steaks. It's just me and the boys and the wife. Like, granted, the boys are starting to eat more and more, so a small top round, we can polish that off as a family. But I get a bigger one off of a big meaty doe, or I get a nice sized buck, and I've got this big piece here. It's one of those, like, well, now I have this. I have to think ahead to not at the processing end of it, but now I have this extra piece sitting in my fridge that I'm thinking of. Well, how do I want to make more steak? Do I want to do a roast? Do I want to do something? So I've thought it out, and I feel like I'm now pigeonholed myself by
Yeah.
using that whole muscle group. I didn't prepare it ahead of time. I saved time at the beginning to now have the headache at the end. Whereas I think you've taken yours and flipped that, take the extra time, take the diligence, mark out what I want, prep those out, cut my steaks. Then it's just a matter of fact of pull that out of the freezer, hit the pan, and there's no headache there at that point.
And but Nick, I also do the same thing as you on some of them. Remember? I mean, I got 5 deer in the freezer. So,
Right.
and it's a great photo. Remember, I'm doing food photography. So, like, it's a great photo when you have a whole top round or you have a whole bottom round or, you know, especially that big piece of backstrap. So, yeah, so I'll also be in the same situation as you. So, I'll have those big cuts on some of them. And man, it makes butchering so much easier when you come back and you're like and you're not cutting them up into those big pieces, and I'm just paper wrapping maybe that big chunk and labeling that. That's actually pretty nice. And then it gives me a lot more options, right? Am I gonna make it into jerky, or just put this giant steak on the grill and then slice that up super thin and serve that? That looks pretty cool at Thanksgiving, or at Easter dinner or Christmas, or just a big gathering during the summer, just to do this big, giant, massive steak on the grill, you know, or roast or something like that. So, yeah, I can be in that same situation as you, but then, whereas you're trying to think about what am I going to do for the next meal, you know, I have these cuts. Then I'm also, before I take something out of the freezer, I'm thinking about what am I going to do with this piece of meat? Okay, I maybe have this recipe idea for a client, right? So out of this one cut, can I get something for this client, this client, this client? Like, I could maybe get 4 recipes out of this one cut, right? I could do this one for my website, this one for, you know, this knife company, this one for this magazine, and then I literally could do 2 days of cooking, and so I could have lunch, take the photos, right? Develop the recipe, take the photos, and then my wife comes home for lunch. Boom, that's one dish I sold, and then now I do it again for supper. Boom, that one's, and so, you know, I and then the next day, you know, I can do 2 more, lunch and dinner, lunch and supper, and so just with that one cut, I can get 4 meals out of it. So
Absolutely.
makes my life a little bit easier, you know, and productive, you know. I'm actually getting paid to just be able to do it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, makes makes it a little easier. But you got to get really creative too, because you don't want to serve the same thing
Over and over and over again.
over
Yeah.
and over and over again. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The girls would get pretty sick of tacos and burgers all the time. Well, Lucia wouldn't. Melissa does not like tacos and burgers all the time. So,
Right. No,
yeah.
my boys, if they have spaghetti 4 nights out of the week, they'd be happy as clams. Like
Oh,
they're
yeah.
fine with that, or tacos.
Yeah.
They are in that zone where they can eat that the over and over again. We're actually getting to the point now. Well, some weeks is 1 pound for all 5 of us, and now that they're in wrestling, and like, yeah, again, like some days not a big deal, but then other days they come home and they're like, all right, I am starving. We'll pull 2 pounds out, and it's like, even my youngest is like, can I get 2 more tacos? Like, you've already had 3. Like, holy smokes, boy! Like, we're in that moment now where we're going to be feeding these boys. So, you know, larger cuts are going to be good for us. But I did like how you played out where it's kind of like a, again, understanding who your clientele is, understanding how you eat or your family eats or people that you're cutting for eat. Those pre-made packages are super convenient, but it does take the effort to put those on at the beginning versus where I may be saving some time at the processing end of it, but now, along with a little bit of headache and a little bit of extra prep, it does leave me more options to go with.
Right.
If I want to experiment with something, if I want to try something with a large piece that is specifically like, ooh, this would be really good for pastrami, or this would be really good for XYZ, that is how I can handle that. Maybe
Yeah.
finding a balance. Maybe that perfect thing is we find a balance here where I've got some pre-made where the wife isn't going to feel intimidated to pull that out and make that up. But granted, right now we've got 50 pounds of burger made up, and those boys are all about it. So it's like, I guess that's my pre-made right now is just ground.
And really, the recipe ideas for ground venison, because we got a whole bunch. We just did a big grinding session too, just before Christmas. I mean, the amount of just do ground. I think a lot of people kind of pigeonhole themselves in, right? You just like they think wild game, right? That this is what I'm going to do, and that's why I think I just do what I do on the website. Um, you know, you look for just a burger, like a ground meat or ground beef recipes, and there's a million of them out there, and you can just substitute ground venison. You know, it doesn't just have to be chili, but like chili is super popular, and that's great. Venison spaghetti, we just did one of those recipes, but I just did like a stuffed cabbage soup, right? Because it's just ground beef, right? But that like super popular. That got picked up. That's one of my top 10 recipes, and it's like one of my latest ones. But like it just blew up because it's soup season, but also it's just one of those super easy things to do. I there's all kinds of great things that you can do with ground meat. So I think just when people think about wild game, I just really encourage them to look out there and see, sloppy joes, but just like Google ground beef recipes and like ideas and be like, whoa, that looks really good, right? Like there's some pretty cool ones on my website, but there's a lot of other great ones that I haven't even got to that people can find and should have fun experimenting with. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like casserole got a really bad rep right around the 2000s or like early 2000s. Like everybody was like, ho hum and casseroles.
Yeah.
But when you start, I'm a food mixer. If I take my Thanksgiving plate and it all ends up as one thing in the middle, like I just love to put all that together. So when I see a layered casserole now as an adult, I'm like, oh man, like this is going to be really good. Or like even a shepherd's pie where I'm still getting that hardiness of like what a stew would be, but it's completely different realm, texture, feel, but it all uses the same ground meat. Like, what a way to translate something from mundane into something that is exciting, something that is brand new on the table, but it still flexes on those same flavors and same textures that we're used to.
Yeah, we were over at my wife's cousin's last night and they served up a pasta salad with ground beef. And I was like, I've just never had this. And then the kids were like breaking up Doritos over it and then slathering Western dressing on it. And I'm like, okay, I've never seen this. And I just followed everybody else's lead and it was really good, right? So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do this at home with some ground venison. I don't even know what it's called, but it was just like literally like a pasta salad with like diced peppers and onion, some ground beef, and I'm like, and
And
like
smashed up
I was like,
Doritos.
and smashed up Doritos and then like Western dressing, like salad dressing. I'm like, this is delicious, right? It doesn't have to be fancy. It was just, and everybody ate it, kids, adults, like, yeah, toddlers on up. It was awesome. So
That's
yeah,
great.
yeah,
So I've got a prep idea. I've seen it done with poultry, and I wanted to just run it past you. Maybe some tips, maybe some tricks, or maybe a disclaimer of don't do that. as I'm getting pieces of meat ready to go, I've seen where people have, or like you can get them at the store, a pre-marinated either steak or piece of like I'm thinking specifically an inside round or an eye round off of a deer where it's a more tubular shape where off of big deer one can feed two people or off a smaller deer like one whole muscle would be a serving. uh, but to take that and actually freeze it in a bag or seal it in a bag with a marinade already, a marinade of whatever choice that I wanted to make. But at that point, I'm marinating it in the Ziploc bag and then putting it into the freezer for long storage to be pulled out later, opened up, and just like you said, it's ready for the grill pan. It's ready for the charcoal grill or wherever I want to go with it. But to specifically find a couple muscle groups or steaks that I wanted pre-marinated with a little bit of different seasoning to it. What do you think about that idea of pre-marinating into the Ziploc or excuse me the vac bag to then have that be an open as soon as it's thawed? Is that a good idea? Is that a bad idea?
Yeah, you know what? You emailed me this idea earlier today, right? And
Yeah.
so my wife was home for lunch, and I mentioned it to her, and I'm like, I don't know, and she goes, "Hello, pork, our favorite pork tenderloins, right? Those marinated pork tenderloin, you know, the marinated pork loins that we get at the grocery store that are they're just super delicious. They've got different flavors like the mesquite and things like that. Those are some of the best things out there. Like there's pretty rare occasion that I'm not eating wild game, but a rotisserie chicken
Oh
and those
man, that's
marinated
like
pork and
crack.
those
That is
marinated
drug.
and those marinated pork tenderloins.
Yes.
Yes, we had a deal at our local grocery store because I still have a couple in the freezer. There was like buy one get one free. It was a special on a Friday back in October, and yeah, I made multiple trips to the store. So yeah, Nick, I'm with you on this one. I think I've got a couple Eye of Rounds in the freezer that I think would be perfect because they're right about that same similar size. Now the question is, how long are we marinating it? Are we putting it in the marinade, and then are we going to vacuum? Right, so we need vacuum seal it, and then we're freezing it because then on the tail end of that, as we thaw it out, right, it might take a couple days to thaw out in the fridge. How is that going to go well on the meat? I think it depends on what we're choosing for marinade. I
Mhm.
would definitely stay away from citrus, right? You know, things that,
Avoid citrus.
yeah, I mean, because, anytime you're going to use citrus, like a super high, like a high acid, something like that, you don't want to do long marinades with that. You can just really end up with some mushy situations. So,
Because that's where I was kind of thinking about like, well, if we break down a marinade, it's an oil, it's a it's an herb or it's a salt element, but then it's
yeah,
also got the acid in there, and you need those three
yeah.
to play together. But like just like you said, if we were to actually be too acidic, would we be chemically cooking that? Would we be mushing that up to the point of where we go past what the desired tenderness was going to be? We're going to make it mushy.
I think we just need to be when we're thinking about it really depends on how long. Once you take it out of the freezer and it sits in the fridge, how long is it sitting in there? So, I think maybe we'll put in the show notes. Everybody can. I'll give my shipping address and everybody can send me their Eye of Rounds, and I will experiment. And I will do my due diligence, right? We'll do like 2 days of marinade before you freeze it,
Yeah.
then thaw it out. Yeah, because your listeners, their happiness is my only concern, and
Oh,
so
we hear that,
yeah,
folks.
Yep. So I am gonna do all this experiment. So you guys just send me all your eye rounds, and
I can't
and then
wait
but
to
then
see.
I'm gonna nail the recipe down, and then by next year, then you can keep yours. You can keep them, but
Oh,
then
okay.
I'll have this down. But yeah. Uh, Nick, I am ready to do this experiment. I'm just trying to figure out which cuts I want to use. Um,
Yeah, because I
yeah,
that's where I went with like the eye of round. It's it's not as it's a little more sturdy than
yeah,
say like a backstrap. I feel like we could ruin a backstrap by vac sealing it with a marinade and let the marinade go too long. Um, I guess then we were talking like in the fridge. I know like with a piece of turkey, I'll use a turkey breast, um, and I'll do for like a zesty Italian dressing. I'll do it like a 30-minute soak. If I go past 30 minutes, that piece of breast is already beginning to feel goopy and lose its structure. Like it's really falling apart at that point. But at the same
I do the
time,
same thing. Yeah, no, go. You go ahead. Go ahead.
okay. But at the same time, like you get something like the thigh will hold up a little bit longer to that. A because of the connective tissues in that, and that's off a turkey. But then to translate that even into venison, like that eye of round is going to be a little more sturdy. And even if you go with even a little more worked muscle. You even look at the bottom round off of that hind shoulder, or even shoot like a mid roast to have a marinated mid roast. I, I guess that translation is also hard because I'm going to give that a low slow cook anyway. But for on like the inside round or even on the bottom round, if I'm going to turn that into steak and to give it a jump start with a marinade, I'm at the butcher block. We're cutting things up, but I happen to have that marinade made up, ready to go. I pour in, you know, whatever amount that you're going to have to guess with that. You're going to have again through the experimentation. We're going to play with that.
Yeah.
Back seal that in, and it goes right into the freezer. And by giving it like how long would you normally marinate something, that comes into play after the thaw. But now as it's frozen, are we also is it still working at just a very slow rate? Like we've talked about aging at some points, like wet aging inside of a bag. That still happens, but just at a very, very slowed down rate. Is that still happening with the marinade then at that point?
Yeah, and I think especially with when you're freezing certain ingredients, especially if you're like me, you may be pulling out things out of your freezer that are 2 years old. Now, if you just marinated some meat and you put it in the freezer, and some of those other ingredients are 2 years old,
Yeah.
some things freeze well and some things don't. So if you're gonna do this marinating situation, and you cross your heart and hope to die, and that you're gonna use this within the recommended 3 to 4 months, then I think you're gonna be okay. I think just like certain ingredients, and I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, but nothing is coming. But I think we could maybe not have a good situation. If we're literally putting it in there for a year, or
Right.
going way past that. But
There
I
is a
I think
shelf life even
yeah,
in the freezer because of the marinating aspect that we're
yeah.
putting to it.
But let me tell you, I have no qualms about if it's for myself. I have no qualms about pulling out a piece of meat that's been especially if it's antelope. I'm like, oh my god! And by the way, I have no antelope left. It's been too long since I've had a tag. But yeah, going through the freezer, I just pulled out some stuff. Now we're pretty much down to the last. Everything's a year or less,
Hmm.
because I just went through the freezer and wrote everything down, and took and figured that out. But so yeah, um, I'm willing to do this experiment if you are, and I think if we play around with it and see what are those different cuts and how that's going to go, and maybe we can see what might be a happy medium and come up with a recipe for the listeners.
Absolutely.
I think that would be pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To put a bow on it, I'm gonna play my full deck. I'm gonna play my cards here. I'm gonna go with that eye of round, and I want to go with an Asian style because what I want to be able to do is marinate it, pull it out, and be my oldest has gotten big into ramen. He likes to make ramen. He's cooking for himself. Like we're still in the basic level. Um, but he made me 2 fried eggs the other day, and he was like, "Dad, you want any eggs?" I'm like, "Yep." So I was getting up to go help him out, and he's like, "No, no, go sit down. I'm gonna do this." So there, my boy is cracking eggs. He is, he's putting butter into a pan, and he's, dropping the egg into there. I like runny eggs, and so I was like, you know what? It can't be any, it's not going to be any less safe than me making it myself. So hey, that's fine. But he brought me 2 eggs, and so I was like, oh, this is so cool. And now he's getting into the ramen, but now he wants to add the stuff into it. And so that's
Yeah.
where we were like, hey, let's do some veni in there. We'll slice that up. And so I was marinating it anyway. And so that's where I was like, maybe I can take like an Asian inspired, maybe like a sesame marinade, or even just something with soy sauce, like Hojian sauce, like that salty sweet aspect, just a basic level, and
Yeah.
then put those away, so that yeah, it's literally like he wants to do it, he can pull it out. Even at the age of 9, he could pull that out and let that thaw out. Now he's going to wait for Dad to help him put the whole dish back together, but at the same time, like that's where my inspiration was going. Is like, I need a super quick meal now. I pull that right on out. Second element, I know I said we were going to put a bow on this, but now I'm bringing it back up because what if we wanted to do that with meat that we've already frozen? I think you get a one and done on something like that. Do you think I could thaw out a piece of something from the haunch, a round, the eye round, thaw it out, get it to the way I want it, silver skin off, maybe even pre-cut it, get it back into a vac bag, in with the marinade, freeze it, and still come out with a satisfactory product? Or do I not even have that one and done aspect? Because once you get to 2 times, then you got the ice crystal, you got the leaching out.
Yeah.
It's mush at that point. But can you get the one trial out of it?
So you're asking, you're thawing the meat out.
Could you thaw out a piece of? So I've already frozen
Yeah.
all my
Yep.
quantity.
Now
Pull
you're
out a
taking it
couple eye
out, and then you're going to
rounds.
refreeze it, right? And
Yeah.
then you're going to refreeze it in the mirror. Yeah, I don't see that. Again, I think it's just a matter of time. Like, how long are you letting, when you pull it out that first time? It doesn't mean you have to let it sit in the fridge, like really thawed out, like for days, right? I think if you're doing that, as soon as it gets
So
where
where
it's
you can,
manageable,
yeah, where you can
yeah,
actually
it's not
get
frozen
the
solid,
outside off. If the inside's still frozen, but you can
right?
actually, like, as you're cutting steaks, you can get your blade through it.
Right. I think that's where a lot of people, because I'll do the same thing, Nick. I'll I might end up with like a big piece. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to get to this. I changed my mind and I want to just use half of this bottom round for something, and now I want to refreeze the other one. But I know that, like, as I'm pulling it out, and so literally as soon as I can slice through it, and then I'm gonna get that piece of meat back in the freezer. And I think you could do the same situation. As soon as it thaws out, where it's gonna take that marinade. Then you could do that. I think you're safe to do it. I don't see any problem with it at all. So, but
Awesome.
letting it sit and thaw out for 4 days in the fridge, and then
Yeah.
you're trying to refreeze it, and then you're thawing it out for another 3, 4 days. now we're ended up, now we're running into food safety issues, but although no one has ever died from that, right? We hear that all the
Right.
time.
Nothing's ever been
Right.
recalled, but at the same time, you can still screw something up pretty bad, make
Right.
yourself sick.
Yeah. But no, no, I don't see a problem with it at all. Yeah.
Awesome. So there you go,
Yeah.
folks. Now we can put the bow back on. We're going with Asian designed inside rounds that we are going to slice, add the marinade in, and I'm going with a basic uh, Asian marinade. It's going to be soy sauce, probably a little bit of honey because I'm going to want to get some sweetness in there, but stay right there in that Asian territory. Seal it back up, put it into the freezer. When my boy's ready for ramen, we're going to pull that out, give that all a quick sear, and that's going to get dropped into those noodles. So
All right.
that's the game
And then
plan.
Nick, since you're doing that version, then I'm going to do something like more of like a mesquite, kind of a smoky
Ooh,
version,
there you go.
and then we can kind of compare on how that works. So
I like this. So yeah, to be continued on the final, but now we got people thinking about it. People are going to be wanting to see what we do with this.
yeah, definitely.
Well, that's our food preparation. That's our meal planning that we're thinking of happening. Because shoot, man, you put 5 deer in. I'm on the light side this year. I only put 3 deer in. I got a big buck, so I'm actually working with some really big pieces. I'm saving those top rounds for jerky. I like really big cross sections. I like to cut with the grain. I want to chew on that piece for 10, 15 minutes. So that's why I'm saving those. I want the big old paddles of jerky. But then I got a doe during firearm, during shotgun season. I got a doe. So I got my tender cuts. I got my little portioned pieces that are going to be good. And then I got one off the side of the road. It was a fresh kill, and that was my bonus deer of the year. But with that,
Nice.
with only having 3 animals in, I think that's going to help me actually clean out a bunch of meat that's been in there for the past year, the past 2 years. Like you were mentioning earlier, you got stuff that's in there maybe 2, 3 years, and you want to start using that stuff up. This is what I'm going to use my lean year as a way to kind of just use up the stuff that I've been either saving back or ruffling around and clearing out a lot of that extra inventory.
Yeah, no, that's always good to kind of go through it and like take an inventory. I think that's a big thing too. And then I can, and then for me, I can sit there and literally plan out the year. Here's what I'm going to do for recipes because I might have regular clients that I have to cook. I have to do a recipe every month for them, and so like I can literally plan that out, and then meal plan for the family. And here's what we're going to do. So I might knock out like, I did 2 different soups today, right? So the girls and I are going to have leftover soup. And then, like a couple days ago, I did a soup. Today I did 2 soups. So it just kind of depends on, but then we also have like fajitas mixed in. We have, you know, for Taco Tuesday and stuff like that. But so it just trying to mix that up and meal plan and see how it works. But then I might think I have a plan in my head, and then it's like
Absolutely.
I'll see something like something will pop up or I'll be with Lucia at the library because she's 8 and so she's just devouring books. So we're at the library at least once a week, and then I'll wander over to the cookbook section and there'll be a new cookbook and I'll page through and it might be like Thai food or Vietnamese or something like that. I'm like, oh, this looks cool. I got to try this with venison or something like that. So yeah, so try to do some meal planning, and I think my wife always appreciates that too. When I leave town and I'm going to be gone for a week with a client or doing a butchering or cooking class somewhere, I kind of have everything laid out. I'm thawing stuff out, kind of have an idea of what some cuts might be and some recipes, because she likes certain things. Like I'll have some soup, I've portioned it out, right? I did a soup today, ravioli soup, venison ravioli soup. and she was like, this would freeze really well, minus the pasta.
Right.
Right. So do the broth with the meat, everything's cooked and ready to go, and literally all I have to do is heat it up, throw in the pasta, and 10 minutes later I have supper. So she kind of helps me think out those things because usually when I'm eating, there's not a lot of leftovers.
Yeah.
There's, I'm portioning it because I got to move on to the next recipe for the next client or for the next post on the website. So, but she likes those things in the freezer. So, meal planning is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you say we're working on some soups. Let's finish out our conversation with breaking down a great soup or stew. That I mean, shoot, it is super cold outside. Not a lot of people are going places. Having a pot of soup just simmering on the stove, that needs to be in every household right now. That's going to get you through. Inspire us. What have you been working on? What is a soup that we need to all try?
You probably the best soups that you'll ever eat will be every soup that's on wildgameandfish.com, right? There's my plug.
Oh man,
There's my plug for the
I was
website.
gonna give you a minute, and no, he stole it in the show. By the way, folks,
No,
links and all the links will be in the show notes. Don't worry about trying
no,
to search all over to find it. We'll have links at the bottom. But anyway,
no, yep,
continue on.
no. Feel free to spend as much time on the website as possible. Yeah, no. Let's see. So the one I did right after New Year's, that stuffed cabbage soup. It's if you have a pound of venison in your freezer, just ground venison. That's a great one. It's just that it's really interesting, and I was inspired by that because like cabbage soup are really the cabbage soup diet for New Year's. That's actually a super popular thing. That's why I timed that recipe for right around New Year's because people are searching on Google for cabbage soup recipes because it's actually a weight loss because it's filling but it's low in calories, and
Yeah.
so that's why I kind of went with that. So there's that one. If you like cabbage rolls, it's basically that and put it in a soup because cabbage rolls can take some time to assemble. And so that's why I went with the soup version. There's a grouse and wild rice soup that's to die for. I actually made that. I had come back, not this last year, but the year before. I got stuck in Bismarck. We got like in the middle of a blizzard for 3 days coming back from deer opener. And I had some Sharpies, some sharp-tailed grouse. And so I was like literally forced to come up with something for food. At my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, they have a flower farm there in Mandan, North Dakota, right next to Bismarck. And so I was like, she had wild rice in her cupboard. And so I had these grouse, and so I came up with that one. And they, it's a hit when your sister-in-law goes back for thirds.
Yes.
Then you're like, yes, okay. So that one is a super popular one. That's a great one too. For tortilla soups, I've got a rabbit tortilla soup.
Oh, good, good. I have a rabbit.
Yeah.
I just confit it.
Okay.
So I've taken an extra step. I really wanted it to be soft, velvety, and so I went with an olive oil confit in a Ziploc bag, or not a Ziploc, but a vac bag, sous vide
Yeah.
style. So, but anyway, it's real tender, and I've just kept it inside that olive oil fat. But man, to translate that into a soup would be awesome.
Yeah, I've got my last rabbit out of my freezer. We were talking about, going through the freezer and taking, and I was like, oh, there's a rabbit left. So I actually have that one out. I'm going to be playing around with that and doing a couple recipes here tomorrow with the rabbit. So we'll see what comes out of that. But yeah, by the time this airs, there'll be a venison ravioli soup. So with that one, it was super, super easy. You're literally like browning ground venison, like a pound of ground venison with some onion, and then add some minced garlic, dump a can of crushed tomatoes, one of those containers of beef broth you can buy at the store that have exactly 4 cups. dump that in there, some oregano, dried basil, and and then like bring that to a boil, lower it to a simmer, and then add the refrigerated ravioli, like that cheese ravioli.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and just dump that in there. And so that's that soup that Melissa was talking about. She was like, this would be a perfect soup for meal prep. So you can make the soup, the broth, in advance, and then freeze it, and then your family, you are, on a weeknight. But that all came together in 25 minutes from start to finish. I mean,
Nice.
like the whole soup.
Yeah.
That's like throwing the pasta, because that refrigerated pasta literally takes 3 to 4 minutes for it to cook. You just dump it in that simmering broth.
I was to say
And
you
that,
don't even have to do it on the side and then pour it down and have it to, incorporate it. Just take
no,
it
yeah,
frozen straight through into the simmering
yeah,
soup that you already have going with that. I love
yeah.
that
So you can
idea.
use dry pasta. I mean, you could use penne pasta. You could throw that in there too if you wanted. If you don't want to, I went with the refrigerated pasta because it was on sale today at
Yeah.
the grocery store. I was like, oh, this is like way cheaper than it normally is. And so I went ahead and was like, oh, I can get a couple
Pick that
recipes
up.
out of
The
this.
fresh pasta. Yes.
Yeah. So that's a super good one. If you like, just if you want to do something just other than your basic tomato soup and you want to add some wild game to it, yeah, that one will be out next week. So that one would
Beautiful.
definitely be a good one to try out too. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, he'll have we'll put the link in there. We'll search that up and we'll have the link for venison tortilla soup. I tell you what,
Venison
I have
ravioli soup.
a ravioli soup. Excuse me,
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
tortilla.
Raviolis. But
It was a
tortilla, yeah,
ravioli
yeah.
soup.
Or the rabbit tortilla. Yeah, rabbit tortilla soup, venison ravioli soup. Yeah, you got it.
I love it. We'll put those links in the show notes so folks can search that up and get that started. I got a pot of chili that I need to finish before that, but I'm not afraid of leftovers like you. I can eat chili for the next week, and then I'll just be prepared for the ravioli soup that I'm going to do the week after. So hey, we're meal prepping as we're
That's
doing the
right.
show.
That's right.
Well, we've mentioned it just a couple times, Jeff. Where can my listeners find out more about you? You've got the website. Where can we find and interact with you on social media? How can we look more up about you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. It's at Wild Game and Fish. A lot of people also find, on Pinterest. If you have one of those people who are looking for recipes, and they're finding a lot of them on Pinterest, which a lot of people do, that's Wild Game and Fish Chef. And then, or you can go on the website. All the recipes are there. You can, they're all free. You can subscribe to the weekly newsletter where you're getting a brand new recipe every single week. So it might be pheasant this week. It might be venison the next week. It might be fish the next week. But all those recipes are free, and that is at wildgameandfish.com.
Well, Jeff, this has been awesome to get a chance to talk with you. I know it's been a while since we've talked, so it's been great to do that. And man, I think we got people a load to chew on, whether it's going to be planning out stuff or whether it's going to be making some soup, because yeah, it's cold out here. So I'm going to have you hold on. I'm going to send the listeners on out. Folks, we got a lot here to talk about. We got a lot here to think about. I mean, we went through the process of butchering our own animals, and maybe we took the shortcut and we have the whole pieces that we're now having to, be creative on the backside. Maybe we help ourselves out and we think a little bit forward. Maybe we do a marinade and we freeze some whole muscle with a marinade in a bag and then use that in the next 2 to 3 months. Don't let it die in there. But at the same time, that's getting us to be able to think outside the box. That's helping us look forward to when we're using our hard-earned harvest. We put so much effort into bringing that animal down. Let's give the same amount of effort to as we're bringing it back to life in a dish. And yeah, with it being as cold as it is, making a ravioli soup out of venison sounds absolutely delightful. So whether it's you going to be actually thawing out some meat and having to cut it up into steaks to marinade, or it's cutting cabbage for a nice cabbage soup that you're going to add some venison into. Whatever you're doing, make sure that knife that you are using is very sharp.